I always thought my marriage to David was perfect, or at least good enough. We had been married for 5 years, and though things weren't always easy, we were a family. Our daughter, Amy, was born a year after we tied the knot, and from that moment on, she became my entire world. But David, my husband, never seemed to share that same connection with her. At first, I told myself it was just stress from work, or maybe even the shock of becoming a father. But as time went on, I started to notice something unsettling. David wasn't just distant, he was cold. From the moment Amy was born, he barely looked at her, let alone held her. When I handed our newborn daughter to him at the hospital, his face was blank. He glanced at her for a second and then passed her back to me like she was nothing more than a stranger's child. I tried to ignore it. I told myself he would come around, that he needed time to adjust. But weeks passed, then months, and nothing changed. Meanwhile, our family visits with my sister Sarah and her daughter Hannah were filled with warmth, just not for Amy. Whenever we saw them, David's behavior changed completely. He doted on Hannah, my niece, in ways he never did with our own child. He'd hold her, play with her, and make her laugh. The way he looked at her, so full of affection, left me confused and hurt. Why couldn't he look at Amy that way? The contrast between his behavior towards Amy and Hannah was too sharp to ignore. I found myself questioning what was wrong. Was it me? Was it something about Amy that David couldn't connect with? Over time, the doubts began to gnaw at me, and no matter how many times I tried to push them away, they always came back. As Amy grew older, it became clear that I was raising her alone. David was consumed by his job, constantly working late hours and throwing himself into his career with a level of passion he had never shown for his family. I tried to talk to him about it, hoping that we could fix whatever was broken between us. But every time I brought up Amy, he'd brush me off. "I'm busy with work," he'd snap. "I don't have time for this right now." I wanted to believe that he was just under pressure. After all, he had big ambitions and was determined to climb the corporate ladder. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about work. There was something else, something darker, that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Amy, for her part, was a joyful and lively child. She was everything I had hoped for in a daughter, bright, kind, and full of life. She loved going to kindergarten, making new friends, and playing in the park. Watching her grow was the only thing that kept me sane as my marriage began to crumble around me. I had friends who tried to help, other moms from Amy's kindergarten, who listened as I vented my frustrations about David's distance. One of them even suggested divorce. "If he's not interested in being a father, maybe it's time to walk away," she said bluntly. The thought of divorce terrified me. I wasn't sure I could raise Amy on my own. And more than that, I didn't want to take her father away from her, even if he barely acknowledged her existence. But the idea stayed in the back of my mind, growing louder with each passing day. I began to wonder if I was making the right choice by staying in this marriage. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late, and Amy had already gone to bed. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea and thinking about the conversation I needed to have with David about our future. That's when he walked in, looking more serious than I had ever seen him. He didn't sit down or make small talk. Instead, he went straight to the point. "We need to give Amy's heart to Hannah," he said, his voice calm but firm. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. "What did you say?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. David didn't flinch. "Hannah is dying," he explained. "She needs a heart transplant, and Amy's heart is a perfect match. If we don't act fast, Hannah won't survive." The room spun around me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "You want to take Amy's heart?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. David nodded. "It's the only way to save Hannah." I was frozen in place, my mind racing to catch up with what he was saying. How could he ask me to do something like this? How could he ask me to kill our daughter for the sake of his niece? I tried to speak, but no words came out. I couldn't even process the horror of what he was suggesting. David continued, as if what he was asking was perfectly reasonable. "Organ donation is possible with parental consent. We can make this happen. We just need to agree to it, and it'll save Hannah's life." My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the table. I felt sick, like I was about to throw up. "How could you even think of this?" I finally managed to ask. David's expression remained stone cold. "Hannah is my daughter," he said quietly. Those words hit me like a freight train. I stared at him, trying to make sense of what he had just said. "What do you mean, she's your daughter?" David sighed and looked down, as if the weight of his secret was finally too much to bear. He explained everything in a detached, almost robotic manner. He had been having an affair with my sister Sarah for years. Hannah wasn't just my niece, she was David's biological daughter. I felt the floor drop out from under me. The man I had loved, the father of my child, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And now he was asking me to sacrifice Amy, our daughter, to save his secret love child. My body went numb, and I couldn't stop the tears from streaming down my face. "You married me just to stay close to Sarah," I said, the realization dawning on me. "You never loved me, did you?" David didn't deny it. He didn't even try to comfort me. "This isn't about you or me," he said. "It's about saving Hannah." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was willing to kill our daughter to save the child he had fathered with my sister. The cruelty of it was unimaginable. "I will never let you hurt Amy," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "She's our daughter, and I will protect her no matter what." David's eyes darkened, and for the first time, I saw the true extent of his coldness. "Hannah's life is more important than Amy's," he said. "We need to do this, whether you like it or not." In that moment, something inside me snapped. I realized that the man standing in front of me wasn't the person I thought I had married. He was a monster, someone who was willing to destroy our family for his own selfish desires. I couldn't stay in that house another second. I needed to get out, and I needed to take Amy with me. That night, I packed a bag, grabbed Amy, and left. "We're going to Grandma and Grandpa's house," I told her as I buckled her into the car. "We're leaving Daddy behind." Amy was confused and sleepy, but she trusted me. As we drove away from the home that had become a prison, I made a silent vow to protect her at all costs. David would never get the chance to hurt her. I wouldn't let him. When we arrived at my parents' house, I told them everything. They were horrified by what David had planned. My mother held Amy close, tears streaming down her face, while my father called a lawyer to begin the process of divorce. They promised me that we would be safe, and for the first time in what felt like years, I believed them. But David didn't give up easily. Over the next few days, he bombarded me with calls and messages, demanding that I return home and let him see Amy. When I refused, he sent his parents to try and convince me. They accused me of being unfaithful, logically saying that Amy wasn't really David's daughter. I couldn't believe their nerve. So I told them the truth. I told them about David's affair with Sarah, about how Hannah was really his daughter, and about how he had wanted to take Amy's heart to save her. At first, they didn't believe me, but when they confronted David, he couldn't deny it. The truth unraveled quickly after that. Sarah's husband, Kyle, found out about the affair and was devastated. He filed for divorce and vowed to never let David or Sarah near Hannah again. Sarah, once so proud and confident, was left with nothing. And David, he had lost everything: his marriage, his family, his reputation. In the months that followed, I worked with my lawyer to finalize the divorce. David fought for visitation rights, but I refused. I knew he was dangerous, and I couldn't risk letting him anywhere near Amy. The court agreed, granting me full custody and ensuring that David would never have the chance to hurt her. Life slowly returned to normal. Amy and I settled into a peaceful routine at my parents' house, and she began to thrive in her new environment. She made friends at her new daycare, and I could see the joy returning to her little face. As for me, I felt a sense of relief that I hadn't known in years. One day, Kyle reached out to me. He had been granted full custody of Hannah and wanted to meet up. Despite everything, I felt a strange connection to him. We had both been betrayed by the people we loved most, and we were both fighting to protect our children. When we met, Kyle told me that Hannah was scheduled for a heart transplant. "It's been hard," he admitted, "but I'm doing my best to raise her on my own." I admired his strength. He was a good man, and despite everything that had happened, he still loved Hannah as if she were his own. "Maybe one day Amy and Hannah can be friends," I suggested. Kyle smiled. "I'd like that." As we said our goodbyes, I couldn't help but feel hopeful for the future. Amy and I had survived a nightmare, but we were stronger for it. And now, with the support of my family and friends, I knew we would be okay. Looking back, I can't believe how close I came to losing everything. But in the end, I made the right choice. I chose to protect my daughter, and I'll never regret that. No matter what happens, Amy will always be my first priority. She's my world, and I'll fight for her every single day.